Our people are Brooke Weitzman fans. People who are not Brooke Weitzman fans. I'm like that leader of the Brooke Weitzman fan club. No joke. You get Caesar chances day off school, you get MLK day off school. 50 years from now, our children can get Brooke Weitzman day off school. Honestly, of all the legal issues are front and center of this, and no one has been more involved than me. Done more good work for Brooke has. So. It's about 1:15. We're going to give her about 20 minutes clock, 10 minutes for questions, then we're going to take a break for lunch.
Thank you. If people can't hear me wave, and I'll go get the microphone. I don't see any arms waving. So homelessness in Orange County, right? So now you've heard about the facts that lead to them. You've heard some of the issues, but the solutions are really simple, and they have always been really simple. And no matter what politicians may tell you, the only solution to homelessness is housing. It doesn't take extensive research to figure it out. Once people have housing, they're in fact not homeless, they're just neighbors. And so the question is, how do we get from here to there? How do we get from a place in a county that doesn't even have rent control, although maybe California does now, sort of, almost. But how do we get from a place that has kind of minimal protections for tenants, a minimum wage that is so far below living wage, and a cost of housing that is so far outside what anyone can afford, that it causes this extreme level of homelessness to a place where people have access to housing. And the big gaping barrier to that solution is the political will. So in Orange County particularly, we have lots of money. It is a county of immense wealth. It is, while all the governments think they're out of money, there's a lot of money here. We have lots of land, and despite the fact that every time someone goes to put up a building, the neighbors come out and say it's too dense, you can't possibly build in our city. We have lots of land. We have open space. We have lots of buildings that could be updated, or space that buildings could be put. And so the only thing stopping us from either rehabbing old buildings or building new buildings to create more housing is the political will to take the steps to do it. So when we founded the Elder Law and Disability Rights Center in the end of 2017, beginning of 2017, end of 2016, it was the same time that Orange County, in the midst of a political battle, opened its very first homeless shelter. So I know I recognize some of you. How many people who are here have been to the Courtyard Shelter in Santa Ana? So it's about like a third-ish. So then when I say homeless shelter, the rest of you probably think I mean a building, maybe with walls and maybe rooms and maybe beds. That's not what opened in the end of 2016. What opened is a bus terminal, so an open space that was meant to air out buses, so intentionally breezy. So no walls, no separation, no indoor plumbing. And they filled it with portable toilets and portable showers, and at first mats on the floor that did eventually turn into cots. There was sections for men, women, couples, and pets, but there was no separation between them. So for women who may have been assaulted either prior to or while they were homeless, or same thing for men who may have been assaulted that wanted to have some level of security and privacy, that wasn't an option. That for anyone, kind of the distance you are from your neighbors now is how far people living there are from their neighbors 24 hours a day. So I suspect if you, even in this room, we're going to leave your stuff and get up and go to the bathroom, you probably either take it with you or ask a neighbor or a friend who's sitting with you, hey, keep an eye on my bag. I don't know everyone in this room. I don't want my stuff to be stolen. But not every homeless person has a friend in the shelter to watch their stuff, which meant every time they were going to the bathroom, they're leaving their stuff unattended in a bed with no one to watch over it. And so there's this heightened sense of stress, right? And so the result is that people who are living homeless in Orange County are kind of spending all the time and energy and money they have to survive. And every day the struggle is survival, making it to the next day, figuring out how am I going to manage to get into a shelter today, to not get kicked out, to keep track of my stuff, to get to eat. For people who have too much trauma, to be in a place that's as crowded as a bus terminal with 500 beds in it. Where am I going to stay that the police won't hassle me for being outside because I tried to go there, but it was too scary being in a room where people watched me all day, every day. So when we founded, kind of looked around and said, Orange County, what is going on? And clearly, the people had not been able to overcome this political will barrier. And the county is shifting, right? There is a lot more kind of progressive thinking, a lot more people getting elected in this county right now who are willing to make evidence-based choices. It's funny, when you hear United Way, because United Way partnered on the report with UCI, and when they go out into the presentation, part of the presentation is saying, hey, this idea of housing first, the model that we save a bunch of money is a Republican plan. Like, it was a fiscally responsible thing to do, and then all these liberals jumped on board and said it's the morally right thing to do, and somehow in this divided world that we live in now, that we just can't seem to get over doing it, even though it's both the fiscally responsible and the morally right thing to do. And when you get into religion, right, it's the right thing to do when you look at it from almost any religious perspective. So the only real argument against it is, I'm afraid I won't get reelected, or it's not fair, I earned my big fancy house and they didn't. To which I usually respond, if you want to go live in the same occupancy room and give up all of your things to live the same way the person who can't afford housing does, fine. Like, I'm okay with my tax dollars going toward that one person who wants to give up their comfort to go live in a room, but that doesn't mean everyone else shouldn't get to live inside for all of the kind of moral and financial reasons that you've heard about. So when we looked around the county, we said, there's a lot of work to be done here. The political system is clearly failing to fix it. What can we do from the legal side to start to push solutions? So we went out and we started asking homeless people. We said, you know what? We can't necessarily right now make everyone build you housing because we're not there. If we brought a lawsuit today that said there's an obligation to build housing, we probably wouldn't win. But what are the things we can do to make your life less unpleasant? We know that poverty is criminalized. We know that the Constitution says that cruel and unusual punishment is a violation of your rights, and that criminalizing poverty is, in most cases, deemed to be cruel and unusual, and so that's the basis for a lot of these cases. Is when we go to courts and we say, hey, to put someone in jail for sleeping outside when they had nowhere else to go is cruel and unusual punishment and can't be permitted. To take someone's property when it was clearly just unattended, not abandoned, is an improper seizure of property, because homeless people have to go to the bathroom and go to work, go to the doctor, and do all the same things the rest of us do, and sometimes that means leaving their belongings in a public space. And so with this kind of history of cases leading up, we went to the Orange County community, and the first thing they said is we need the people, the government, to stop coming to the riverbed, taking our stuff and throwing it away. We can't, many of us have jobs, we have doctor's appointments. When they come out here on a regular basis and they bring out a truck and they throw away our belongings, it sends us back every time. So we brought the first lawsuit quickly after that, beginning of 2017, where we said to the county, look, you can't seize and destroy people's stuff, and you can't seize it and go store it from Anaheim down 22 miles south in a place that's only open on occasion by appointment for people who have a phone, if you're lucky enough to find it at all. And what we did is we took a couple of law students and I drove them out to the homeless camp, and I gave them some cash, and I said, here's the address of the place where property is being stored. I'll pick you up when you get there, call me. And I left them there. And so they wrote a very compelling declaration describing their experience of trying to get on the bus, of trying to figure out what bus would take them there. When they got off the bus, trying to figure out which way to walk, trying to catch transfers between buses because it wasn't one. And so a little over, I think it was like 2.5 or so hours later, when they finally made it there, they explained a big part of how they made it there is because I had warned them that they were going to have to walk down a piece of street with no sidewalk, and that they should not get killed because their professors would most surely not let me have more volunteers if that happened. And so the judge immediately said, yeah, this is completely unacceptable. And so we got an order that they had to stop that, and we quickly worked with the county, and that kind of started what we now have is a very good working relationship with the county, and we're starting to build that with a lot of cities, of telling them, look, here's the boundaries of what you can do within the Constitution. Here's the research that UCI did, and the solutions that they've shown you are the right solutions. And what can we do to get you to not just stop violating rights, but to actually solve your own problems and to actually save yourselves a bunch of money? So we partnered with the county and came up with a plan where property would no longer be taken more than a mile from where it was seized, where people could get it back anytime during business hours by calling a number or flagging down a county worker. And then we went to the next biggest encampment in Orange County, which at the time was the Civic Center in Santa Ana. And we had the same conversation. We said, what do you need to make your lives a little less bad between now and when we can fight to get you housing? And the same answer was, we need them to stop seizing our stuff. The trucks come out here twice a week. So we filed almost the same case and very quickly got almost the same result. The city, having seen that the county was now doing the right thing, immediately said, wait, we didn't realize we were violating the law. We do mean to do the right thing. Let's figure out a plan. And they came up with a plan to stop seizing property without warning, and to stop destroying property, and to make sure everyone could get their stuff back during any regular business hours. And so right about that time, which was when it became election season again, and like I started with, this is a political problem. So that first shelter that was open, like the shelter, bus terminal was open, because there was two people throwing mud at each other during an election. We start hitting election season again, and there's a candidate running for district attorney, and his platform is he's going to clean up the crime in the riverbed, and that includes remove everyone from the riverbed. And so we said to the county kind of the same thing. Look, we're not saying people belong in the riverbed. We all agree. They don't. They should live inside housing. But they're there because the criminal justice system ping-ponged them between cities until they finally gave up and went to the place where no one thinks they have jurisdiction. In fact, it's this jurisdictional issue of who's responsible for the riverbed is so bad that sometimes you would see officers from different cities and the sheriffs fighting over whose responsibility it was to investigate a crime. And the result would be no one would investigate the crime committed against the homeless person because everyone thought it was someone else's problem. But that same harm that came to them from no jurisdiction protected them from the level of abuse they had suffered in the cities. So we said to the county, look, you tell us where you want, we'll give them a ride. You pick a spot, I'll get a bus, I'll help people move. But it's got to be somewhere. We can't expect people to disappear, and we can't continue to allow humans to be part of this jurisdictional ping pong. Because what's happened in Orange County for all the years leading up to the study was that no matter how many times the grand jury put out a report or a school investigated or a city did research and saw that there was this kind of siloed thing happening where the cities would say it's the other cities, it's the county, it's them, and the counties would say, no, it's the cities, and no one wanted responsibility. And every report came out saying the same thing. This is a regional problem, that this region needs to get together, that the cities need to partner with each other and with the county to come up with solutions. And every time the governments rejected those theories and did nothing. So in the context of this new lawsuit, we said, where do you want to go? And the county wouldn't give us a place and wanted to proceed. So we had to file what was the third case after we founded the Elder Center, which was asking the judge to ensure that no one would be removed without an alternative. The result was we again got an order, the judge saying, you're right, there has to be some plan. And this was the first time in these cases that a judge actually said, that there's some affirmative obligation that if the government wants to break up an encampment, that if it's in a place where it might otherwise be allowed, they still have to take some steps to ensure these people have somewhere to go. And surely there was lots of mistakes along the way, right? So the county said, okay, we understand we have to do something humane. We're going to put everyone in motels 30 days. And even though we haven't had shelters for all of the decades leading up to now, in 30 days, we're definitely going to have enough shelter beds for everyone. And I suspect everyone here knows that was never going to happen. But because it was the county was taking kind of affirmative steps to do something, we really wanted, we could have kept litigating, right? We could have said, no, this isn't a deal, we want to get orders. But we wanted to have solutions. We wanted to partner with the government. We wanted to build a working relationship that would make the community better. So we said, well, if you think you can do it, go ahead and try. And so that's what they did, is they put people up in the motel rooms for 30 days. And during that time, they started working on getting new shelters and getting new mental health services. And at the same time that all this was happening, the Association of Cities had, coming out of the United Way report again, gotten together and under kind of the leadership of UCI and United Way had come to this plan where they were going to look at the number of likely permanent supportive housing units needed, and they were going to determine how that broke down by city, by population, and they were each going to commit to building permanent supportive housing in their city. And the idea was that people who are not employable need permanent supportive housing, right? They're going to need the housing with wraparound services. The majority of homeless folks are employed or employable, and they just need affordable housing, which is federally subsidized housing at a rate that they can afford based on their income, where they're charged 30% of their income. There are certainly some people who need other mental health programs or transitional programs, and all of those things take a little time to build. And so the fight for shelters is always done keeping in mind that shelters are never going to solve anything, especially if there's not an exit plan of housing, but that if we did them in a way that's better and more humane, has more personal space, and has more dignity, that they can be opened a lot faster in weeks or months, whereas it may take a couple of years to build out buildings. And that we're so far behind the problem now that doing something now is going to save some lives. When we're looking at kind of hundreds and hundreds of people dying in the street in a county that only has a few thousand homeless people, there's clearly a bigger problem, right? We have people who are dying of everything from medical conditions that could have been treated to hypothermia. So the county put everyone up. They did not magically come up with enough beds for everyone within 30 days, but they did start this process which really reshaped the way Orange County looks at the problem. And more importantly, what it did was it sent a message out to the cities and out to the county and out to the politicians that there was going to have to be a solution, that this kind of street to jail cycle was probably going to be ending soon, and that they were going to have to start figuring out how they were going to build in their city and how they were going to make space for all levels of housing, affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, and emergency shelter in the interim. And that was done in ways the politicians thought would sound good, right? So for some politicians it was, well, the federal court told me I had to do it because Brooke sued me, so we have to do it. And for some it was, I've done the research and this is the right thing, and also a judge told me I had to do it. For some it was actually going out and educating the community, actually taking these reports and these numbers and this information and holding dozens and dozens of town halls to answer every single question of every single person until the community could understand that this is what's best for everyone. Because it is the only way to solve the problem, right, is building the actual housing. So with this wide variety of people kind of taking different steps, it freed up the space for all of these cities to start declaring an emergency, which you have to do in order to access some of the state money. To start looking creatively at how they get more state and federal money funneled down into their city to solve these problems, and to really start partnering. And as the settlement started happening, we saw for the first time ever a bunch of cities get together. So the city managers of 12 North County cities, including Fullerton, got together and said, hey, what if we all work together? And what if we all put in some money? And what if we opened up a couple of shelters together? And while surely those are not going to be, like Fullerton alone could fill both of the shelters that are going to open in Winter Park and Placentia, but they are a first step in a part of the county that has never done it before. And now we're seeing Fullerton for the first time saying, hey, you know what, maybe we would allow a provider to come in and open an overnight sleeping area in our city, or maybe we would allow a provider to come in and open a shelter in our area. And in Fullerton, we're looking at a lot of, and the homeless populations, of course, vary by area, but in Fullerton, a ton of students, right? Like we're looking at students who are at Cal State Fullerton who don't have a place to sleep. In Irvine, we're looking at a ton of students who are at UCI who don't have a place to sleep. And we're looking particularly in Orange County at a lot of seniors, right? So the fastest growing homeless population in the country is senior women. It's like your average lower to middle class women who did everything right, and their partner has since passed away, and they planned for their retirement, but when they planned, they thought they'd live to 70 or so, and that was reasonable when they started planning in their 20s. But now they're 75, and people live to 95 or 100 or more all the time, and they're pretty healthy, and they've just run out of money. And so maybe they bought an RV that they plan to live in, but the city starts changing the rules and ban RVs that are over a certain height. And so they start getting tickets until they finally can't register the RV and lose it. Or they bought a mobile home. But the mobile home parks are slowly getting built up. In fact, one in Fullerton right now was just bought up, and it's a senior mobile home park. And the owner is going to raise the rent. And he's probably not even raising it far above market, but he's raising it far above what they've been paying for 30 years and far above what they have. And so their responsible retirement plan is still going to land them homeless if there's not some change. So the space that litigation comes in is really that, is stepping in to say, look, you have an obligation not to criminalize unavoidable behavior, not to seize belongings that clearly are unattended, not abandoned. And it really creates the cover that the politicians who want to can then step in and do the right thing. It takes away the excuse that they won't get reelected if they do the right thing, because it's a lot easier to point to the federal court and blame us darn plaintiffs' lawyers for inconveniencing them and costing them all this money and making them just open these things. And as the shelters are open, it helps with the community, right? The community education, the people realizing, in fact, we are talking about the guy that serves your coffee and the people who work at Disney and the families who go to school with your kids. And that we're, that surely, yes, there are some homeless folks that have serious mental health conditions or substance abuse problems, but those are often exacerbated by just the fact of being homeless. And if we had the housing available, that would be such a small number that it would be much easier to manage. And so we're seeing kind of as the county shifts, then we turn to what someone asked about, which is South County. They're not quite there. So in South County, we do still have ongoing litigation right now, particularly against San Clemente. San Clemente did not get the message that the community was coming together to take some evidence-based decisions. Instead, they rounded the homeless people up into 1/3 of an acre of dirt with no shade and no water and no food, and gave them little tiny tents, which are hitting well over 100 degrees per day because they're not meant to be in the sun, and a couple of porta potties, and no services. And kind of rely on some groups that have started coming there to try and provide support, but are certainly not meeting the needs. And they did it in violation of a whole bunch of environmental law requirements that would have prohibited them using that land in that way. But hopefully, through litigation, we will also get San Clemente and the other cities of South County to a place where they are ready to rethink this approach of criminalization. And it applies across the board, right? So my work focuses on homelessness, but in general, our country has a long history, right, of criminalizing poverty, of taking, often when you look at cases with child services, things that may be called neglect, when you think them through, are directly related to poverty. Like leaving children unattended or malnourished is often related to a parent working 2 or 3 jobs and not having enough money to take care of their child. And so we really kind of rethink what evidence we're gathering, and we have private groups like UCI that come in and do the research that our government chose not to. It puts us in a position to put that evidence in front of the people we elect. So the thing that you all can do, I'm going to echo what you just heard, is please speak to the people you elected. Vote in your local elections, talk to your neighbors. When you see these conversations online, take their report and pop it in there. When your next door app is saying like, oh, homeless person being crazy in the street, be like, oh, here's the facts actually. Most homeless people are employed and are working, and we don't have anywhere for them to go. They didn't turn down services. There just are no services. These shelters are full every day because this really is an education problem, right? And until people have the facts, it is going to be continually difficult to get the people who we elected to do the right thing. And they are often, the more that folks look into it, the more they find local government decisions are often driven by a tiny group of 5 or 10 really, really loud residents who come to every meeting and make a lot of noise. And so the majority of people in your neighborhood may be saying, hey, this is actually, and I'm hearing it more and more, specifically in San Clemente. I'm now getting all these calls from people who live there. Don't use my name. I don't want the vigilantes to know I talked to you, but I really want a shelter. Because there is a small group of 5 or 10 people that are high school bullies, and they are really scary, and they're in the city, and the rest of residents who want solutions are afraid to stand up to them. And so people really organizing and coming together, and I think that's particularly a space where artists can really step in, right? It's helping to bring people together, helping to organize, and helping to give people the kind of empowerment they need to go and speak to their local governments and to speak every time they get an opportunity, because that is the only way that we're going to get to these long-term solutions.
Right. Who's not afraid to stand up to a bully?
Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes for questions in the back.
As somebody that works like in the community, where do I refer homeless people? How do they start these steps? What do they do to get absolutely involved in getting their things back? And because a lot of times they'll have that situation, they don't want to pursue it because they've had such big jumping through the hoops, leads nowhere. So they're kind of at a place of hopelessness. Where do I refer them? How do they start that process?
Are you in Fullerton?
We're in Cologne.
So it really depends on your right? Like it
Yeah.
depends on your local government and getting we plan on going. We actually are going to have our first LA County settlement entered tomorrow, so that'll be the news hopefully. Not with the county, with the city in LA County. But as we get more and more cities involved, but it really is about just kind of like the public coming out and talking to your city government and saying, look, where are you putting this stuff? We want you to be giving it back. We want a process. You see, like saying to them, hey, look at all the lawsuits that are happening in other cities. Like they're clearly coming for us. Why don't we get ahead of it and come up with solutions? Because if there's not specifically a plan in your area, then the community going and asking for it, and I get like all the time we get here from homeless people like, I tried that 53 times, it's obviously never going to work, and I spent an incredible amount of time saying, look, it's not going to work this time either, but I need you to try anyway because we need to be able to have them keep hearing it, because if you give up, they're never going to change. And so really convincing the community, like the homeless community, to be willing to organize and to be willing to come to the meetings and be willing to speak up, and having people who are willing to stand with that community to say, look, we need solutions in our community and we don't want you to use our taxpayer dollars for lawsuits. We want you to solve it first.
Question right here.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping to hear more of an update of the status of legal action on homeless construction in Orange County. There's a lot of fronts right now. One of them is the status of the settlement that was hammered out over the months by your law firm and the courts and the county. So what is the status of that today? Is it finalized?
So we have final
grievance
settlements
reports,
with
for example,
some.
been put out?
We have final settlements with some entities, and we still have ongoing negotiations with others. So that's why we have court again tomorrow, is because we are consistently working to get more government entities to be a part of this kind of evidence-based solution. And certainly anyone who has a problem in any city that we do have a settlement with can call our office. We'll work with them to investigate it. If it's appropriate, we'll get them a hearing with the court for the dispute resolution process. There's not like a regular formal procedure yet because it's too early. There just haven't been enough of them to figure out exactly how this is going to work long term. But we have done it in the cases that have called the office, worked with the other side to resolve it, or gone to the court.
Well, right now, on the street, do homeless have a right to be in a public place prescribed by the settlement?
By the Constitution, anyone who has nowhere else to go has a right to sleep in public because it would be cruel and unusual to punish that behavior. So that has nothing to do with settlement, that has to do with your constitutional rights if you have nowhere else to go.
All right. One up there, one more.
Thank you for your work. I'm curious if, like, what are the limits of the pressure that we can put on city and county officials? Like, for example, this is difficult to address because we have, like, the county fighting and then the individual cities, and so we have both of these closed entities. Is it possible to get a percentage of a county, like, on some sort of list or petition to put pressure on a county versus having to go through every single city? And if that's not the case, is there a percentage per city that we could get of numbers of residents to almost force these council people to this?
So when it comes to the county, it's a district representative, and so in South County, there are 2 supervisors on the county, at least in Orange County, 2 supervisors on the board who represent South County cities and are up for election. And so that, if you're sending emails, if you're campaigning for people who are running either for them or for people who are running against them, that's a space where the community has to say, look, what you've done so far is unacceptable. We want housing and shelter in other areas or whoever your representatives are in your area. And so certainly the cities can do some things to block it, but the county could, if it wanted to, create a lot of the solutions on its own. The county could buy land and build buildings, and the city can't really stop it. The county could buy land or rent land and build shelters. So there's certainly space for the county to do it. I think a lot of the advocacy at the city level came from supervisors in some districts who aren't willing to take steps to do it without the city signing on, which is how kind of the organizing got broader. But there's no reason why the county couldn't if they were motivated by enough calls and emails and protests.
Well, I mean, like the number, like putting something on a ballot has to have an X amount of signatures. Like, is that something that can be done for county? Like, hey, look, we have this amount of signatures, whether you like it or not, we move forward with this.
Yeah, so there could surely be someone putting like a ballot measure saying, minimum housing per jurisdiction or rent control in mobile home parks, right? Like it's a thing that one city at least has tried a few times to vote on and it has been unsuccessful. But if people put out the evidence and said, look, most of these mobile home parks are seniors and families with kids, and they're the most vulnerable, and the new state law isn't going to protect them because it's only for apartments, then there's no reason. Like, the problem with ballot measures are expensive and complicated. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money, but it's not impossible.
Well, I think from a community level, just getting like, 30,000 signatures. And the reason why is because I feel like these elected officials should be held accountable. So if someone dies in your city, I'm going to sue you, supervisor, versus, I'm the Washington DC.
They have a lot of personal protection, and like all government employees, like personal liability, have a ton of protection. So they're never going to be personally responsible for anything other than losing their job.
All right. It's my unpleasant duty to keep us on time. I'm hoping Brooke can be around to answer some more questions.